Welcome to the Leader Within podcast. I'm Sue-Ann Higgins, and today we are diving into what might be the most foundational element of leadership: clear thinking. In previous episodes, we explored the three plateaus that keep women leaders stuck. The leadership plateau, where you feel invisible despite your contributions. The performance plateau, where working harder doesn't give you the results that you want. And the self-doubt plateau, where your doubt undermines your natural leadership abilities. But underlying all these plateaus is often a single challenge: your tangled thinking. When your thoughts are clouded, your leadership presence diminishes, your performance suffers, and your self-belief wavers. That's why today we're focusing on the secret to clear leadership thinking, because clarity isn't a nice-to-have quality. It's the foundation upon which all leadership breakthroughs are built. You know, there's this common belief in leadership circles that pushing through your mental fatigue shows your strength and your commitment as a leader. Just power through it, they say. Great leaders don't quit when they're tired. The best decisions come when you consider every angle. We celebrate leaders who work late, make decisions under pressure, and maintain a packed schedule of back-to-back meetings. I understand why this feels right in a world that values grit and perseverance. Taking breaks can feel like a weakness. It seems logical that more hours spent deciding means better decisions. Plus, nobody wants to be the leader who misses something crucial because they've stopped working too soon. But if pushing through that mental fatigue led to better leadership, then executives who work 80 hours a week and make decisions around the clock would consistently outperform those who protect their mental energy, right? Yet neuroscience shows exactly the opposite. In your PFC, there's a substructure called the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. This is responsible for working memory and focused decision-making. It gets fatigued. It literally changes the way your brain values effort and reward. You're more inclined to take the easy route, to stay within your comfort zone, or into procrastination over any decision. The fatigue initiates a stress response. Stress itself isn't the enemy. It's the incomplete stress response that causes the trouble. It's like a fogged up windscreen of your car when you're driving through dense fog. You can't see clearly. You know the road is there and you know where you're going, but your visibility is completely shot. Your grip tightens on the steering wheel, you lean forward, squint and overcorrect with every single turn, and here's the kicker: your defogger doesn't work. That's what accumulated stress does to the brain as a leader. The fog equals chronic, unprocessed stress. The windscreen is your mind's ability to see clearly, the dorsolateral PFC. The defogger, your body's natural recovery and regulation system, is your insula and nervous system. The overcorrection equals stress behaviour, overworking, overthinking, avoidance and indecision, all the try-harder traps of leadership. The more fog builds up, the less you trust your own view. And if that defogger stays broken, well, eventually you'll either crash or pull over indefinitely. But here's the truth: you can clear the fog. You can restore the system. It just takes learning how to switch the defogger back on. Leadership clarity doesn't come from pushing through fatigue. It comes from recognising when your brain needs a reset and honouring the biological reality by metabolising that stress. Let me ask you, do you want to be the leader who celebrates endurance but makes increasingly poor decisions? Or the leader who prioritises metabolising stress so that they have the strategic mental energy for consistent, clear thinking and better results? To understand how clarity transforms leadership, let's look at the leadership within method and its 4 essential quadrants: brain savvy, personal savvy, people savvy, and change savvy. Brain savvy is where it all begins. This is understanding how your brain works, like the Goldilocks effect I mentioned earlier. When you understand the neurological underpinnings of decision making, stress response, and how your thoughts are often on autopilot, you can work with your brain instead of against it. You recognise when you're in a try-harder trap, and you know how to break free by taking those thoughts off autopilot and reconstructing your thoughts rather than pushing harder. Personal savvy builds on this foundation. It's about developing self-leadership and emotional regulation. When you're personally savvy, you're not at the mercy of every emotional reaction. Your thoughts are intentional. You maintain clarity, even in challenging situations, because you've learned to step back from the immediate emotional response and access your clear thinking, being more responsive with helpful emotion rather than reactive with unhelpful emotion that triggers others. People savvy takes clarity beyond yourself. That's where you develop the ability to read between the lines, understand not just what others are saying, but what they're not saying. You recognise the impact of the 5 gatekeepers of human behaviour on how they respond to your leadership. You know how to shift people from reactive, unhelpful behaviour, responsive, helpful behaviour. Finally, we have change savvy. It allows you to navigate complex environments with adaptability and foresight. You develop the ability to see patterns that others miss, translate your vision in the way that inspires action rather than confusion. You know how to shift people from being compliant to standing behind their cause and being engaged and empowered. These 4 quadrants create a progressive journey from surviving your leadership journey to thriving and then flourishing. When you're just starting to develop these skills, you're in survival mode, reacting to the challenges that arise. As you build savviness, you move into striving mode where you actively work to improve, but still expending significant effort. Next, you reach thriving mode where clarity becomes your natural state rather than something you have to work for. And finally, you and the people around you are flourishing because you're navigating the volatile, uncertain, complex and ambiguous environment that we all live and work within. What's critical to understand is that you need all 4 areas for lasting change. You can't just focus on brain science without applying it to yourself. You can't work on yourself without understanding how to translate that to lead others. And you can't effectively lead others through change if you haven't mastered the previous domains. Let's recap previously shared case studies that illustrate the power of clarity in action. I worked with a leader, let's call her Lee, who was brilliant at strategic thinking but struggled to translate her vision to a team. Every meeting ended with confusion rather than alignment. People would nod during this discussion, but later ask basic questions that made it clear they hadn't truly understood. Lee was caught in a performance plateau. She was working harder than ever before, creating detailed presentations, writing comprehensive emails, scheduling additional meetings, but not seeing the results she expected. Her team remained confused, and executives were beginning to micromanage her. The breakthrough came when Lee learned that her brain was wired for strategic thinking. 6 of her top 10 Clifton strengths were all in this domain, but she lacked the corresponding strengths in communicating that thinking to others. She wasn't lacking capability. She was lacking clarity in how to translate her ideas. After all, it's not what you communicate, but how you communicate. With this insight, Lee completely transformed her approach. Instead of diving into complex strategic rationales, she began with the essential outcomes first. She created simple frameworks that broke down complex ideas into digestible chunks. She stopped trying to convey everything and focused relentlessly on what mattered most in the moment. Within 3 months, her team were not just understanding her vision, but actively championing it. Executives shifted from micromanaging to seeking her input on broader initiatives. And Lee moved to sell from exhaustion to energised leadership. This is the power of clarity. When thinking becomes clear, communication becomes effective, teams become aligned, and leadership presence is amplified. And it all started not with working harder, but with reconstructing how Lee approached thinking and communication. To master leadership clarity, it helps to understand what's happening in your brain during decision making. The prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for executive functions like planning, decision making, and impulse control. This is controlled specifically by the powerhouse of the brain, the substructure called dorsolateral PFC, or the DLPFC for short. You could consider it inner CEO of your brain. Then enter the right anterior insula. This is like your inner compass, body-mind integration. When the DLPFC and the right anterior insula are communicating effectively, something powerful really happens. First, you have cognitive clarity meets embodied wisdom. The DLPFC helps you think through your options and consequences, while the insula helps you feel into what resonates or feels off. This is the neuroscience behind a grounded yes or a clear no. 2, emotional regulation with integrity. The insula registers the body signals of stress or emotion, like the tightening of a chest or a gut twist. The DLPFC helps you interpret and respond to them with intention rather than reactivity. Third, authentic leadership presence. Leaders who seem deeply attuned and decisive, not just smart, are likely integrating these signals from both regions. They're not ignoring their emotions via the insula, nor are they being ruled by it. They're regulating it with the DLPFC. When we're tired, depleted, or emotionally overdrawn, communication between the DLPFC and the insula starts to break down. And here's how it shows up. With DLPFC fatigue, you struggle to prioritise and focus. You second guess the decisions or avoid making the decisions. Emotional regulation weakens, cue impulsive reactions or shut down. Your right anterior insula is disrupted. You become numb to your body cues, a huge red flag for burnout. You may over-intellectualize decisions, ignoring gut instinct. Emotional data gets missed or misread to why didn't I see this coming moments. And when these two regions stop talking, you lose touch with your inner signals and your external strategy. You might power through when your body is begging to pause. Or worse, you lead from autopilot instead of intentionally. These regions sync up when you're fatigued, making you less likely to take on challenging tasks, even if they're rewarding. This isn't about a lack of willpower or grit, it's biology. For women leaders, this cognitive fatigue means you're more likely to undervalue high reward opportunities, avoid crucial conversations, shrink your tolerance for ambiguity, and feel like you're underperforming when your brain is simply conserving energy. I just want to repeat that because this is something I see more often in women. When you are fatigued, you feel like you're underperforming when your brain is simply conserving energy. This is why decision fatigue is a real thing. Each decision you make throughout the day depletes those resources. Our mental state can impact the quality of our decisions in the way we don't recognise. As a leader, this has significant implications. The clarity of your thinking diminishes throughout the day unless you take specific action to rejuvenate your brain's resources. And when you're caught into circular thinking patterns or information overload, you're accelerating that depletion. Leaders who understand brain science don't pride themselves in pushing through the mental fatigue or making decisions under extreme pressure. Instead, they strategically structure their decision making and metabolize the stress to optimize their brain's natural capabilities. They create what I call clarity conditions that support rather than undermine their cognitive resources. So, how do you create these clarity conditions for sustained leadership effectiveness? Let me introduce you to what I call the Leadership Clarity Protocol. It's an evolution of the mental clarity ritual I shared in episode 2 that now incorporates metabolizing stress as an essential leadership discipline. If you've been implementing the mental clarity ritual as we discussed for addressing 2 a.m. overthinking, you've likely experienced improvements in your sleep and thought patterns. Today, we're going to expand the foundations into a more comprehensive approach for maintaining cognitive clarity throughout your leadership day. The first thing to understand is when you're knee-deep in complexity and can't seem to think straight, it's not a lack of skill or your ability to think strategically. It's a signal from your nervous system. High cognitive load, emotional weight, and chronic pressure trigger a stress response that shuts your brain's executive centre down and disrupts your ability to sense what's aligned. Even the smartest leader loses clarity in the fog of unprocessed stress. So before we dive into clarity practices, we need to begin by switching the system back online, so to speak. Step 1, reset your state. You can't think clearly until your nervous system feels safe. Start with a power pause. Sit quietly for 60 to 90 seconds. Breathe slowly with a long exhale. Inhale for 4, exhale for 6. And name what's happening. I'm experiencing cognitive fatigue, I'm pausing to reboot. This simple act restores the prefrontal axis and brings your right anterior insula back into the conversation. Your embodied awareness comes back online. Step 2, externalize the noise. Once your system is calmer, offload your mental clutter so that your brain doesn't have to carry it. Open a document or grab a pen and paper. Without organising, censoring, or judging, pour out every swirling thought that comes to mind. Thoughts, worries, to-dos, tensions, half-formed ideas. This isn't about logic yet, it's about releasing the loop. Why this matters is that the cognitive offloading frees up working memory and begins to reduce perceived stress, helping you restore functionality to your dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. Step 3 is to sort through with strategic awareness. Now it's time to bring gentle structure into your chaos. Group your thoughts into meaningful buckets. Bucket 1, facts. What are real and observable? Bucket 2, assumptions, the beliefs you're holding but haven't tested. Bucket 3, options, possible paths forward. And bucket 4, concerns, what is emotionally charged or feared. This step engages your prefrontal cortex's strength in pattern recognition, logic, and planning, but only once your system has calmed enough down to allow it. Step 4, untangle those thought traps. This is about stepping out of the try-harder traps of leadership. Confusion often comes from distorted thought loops. Scan for patterns like circular thinking, revisiting a worry without moving forward, catastrophizing, assuming the worst case outcomes, mind reading, believing you know what others think without evidence, or perfectionism, delaying action until conditions are right. They're just some of the try-harder traps of leadership. Recognising these isn't just helpful, it's neurological strategic. Naming distortions helps your insula register emotional salience and allows your DLPFC to step in and course correct. Step 5, apply clarifying questions. Now that your brain is functioning at a higher level, apply focused questions to each bucket. The first bucket, facts. Is this actually true or am I projecting? The second bucket, assumptions. What evidence would help me clarify this? The third bucket, options. Which of these create meaningful value, not just relief? And bucket 4, concerns. What's the real risk here and what would help me face it? This is where your inner wisdom and your strategic mind rejoins forces. Step 6 is to synthesize what matters most. Clarity is not about knowing everything. It's about knowing what to trust. From your refined thinking, identify the 2 to 3 factors that truly matter, what you're ready to let go of, and one next decision or micro action. This is where leadership clarity emerges. When both your head and body say yes, the fog finally clears. But here's where the leadership clarity protocol extends beyond the mental clarity ritual. It recognises that sustaining clarity requires consistent clearing. The mental clarity ritual works wonderfully as an intervention for specific challenges, like 2 a.m. overthinking. But true leadership excellence requires you to metabolise that stress throughout the day, not just addressing it when it becomes problematic. Think of stress like an emotional and cognitive residue. It accumulates throughout the day. If we don't constantly release it, it stays in the system, fogging up our thinking and hijacking our emotional responses, draining our decision-making power. That's why metabolizing the stress isn't an option. It's essential for sustained leadership clarity. This means incorporating simple, science-backed rituals throughout the day. The first is morning grounding. Before checking your phone, take 90 seconds to ground yourself with a deep breath to reset your intention for what type of leader you want to be today. The midday reset. Every 3 to 4 hours, take a 5-minute clarity break to move your body, do a quick thought dump, and reset with focused breathing to restore the blood flow to your DLPFC. Then there's connection moments. Schedule 1 to 2 micro connections each day with people who help you feel grounded. Even a quick check-in with a colleague who gets it can calm your amygdala and reactivate your insula's emotional tuning. And finally, we have the evening decompression. Before bed, take 5 to 10 minutes to reflect on what you carried today and that you no longer need, what worked well, and where you may have overwritten your own cues. For those moments when stress spikes unexpectedly, use some micro metabolizers. A physiological sigh, double inhale through the nose, one long exhale, or labeling your feelings, or shifting your posture, or naming something you're grateful for. Part of this process also includes recognizing when you're experiencing cognitive fatigue. Watch for these 5 signs. Making a default decision, like choosing the easy route repeatedly, experiencing mental fog, trouble articulating or recalling, practicing avoidance, postponing decisions, feeling irritable, snapping over small things, and devaluing rewards, losing interest in high payoff tasks. When you notice these signs, don't push through. That's exactly when you need to reactivate your stress metabolism practices. Your leadership clarity isn't lost. It's simply under a fog of an overstressed system. And the most courageous thing you can do isn't to think harder. It's to pause long enough to let that quiet leader within re-emerge. You can't eliminate stress from leadership, but you can eliminate its grip on you by learning to metabolize stress daily, consciously, gently. These protect your brain's brilliance, preserving your leadership energy, and models a new way of leading that doesn't lead to burnout. Because clarity doesn't come from powering through. It comes from knowing when to pause, reset, and return to your quiet leader within. I have 5 concrete steps that you can take to implement clear thinking in your leadership. Action 1 is practice the mental clarity protocol on a current challenge. Set aside 15 minutes today to externalize your thoughts on a complex situation you're facing. Categorize them, identify patterns, apply focus questions, and synthesize your ideas. Action 2. Notice when your thinking becomes circular or tangled throughout the day. Simply becoming aware of your thought patterns is a powerful first step to changing them. Set an intention to catch yourself when you're revisiting the same concerns without resolution. Action 3. Front load your day with high stakes decisions. Schedule your most important thinking work during your peak mental energy times. typically in the morning for most people. Save routine tasks for later in the day when cognitive fatigue typically sets in. Action 4. Create a clarity pause before important decisions or meetings. Take 2 minutes of focused breathing to activate your parasympathetic nervous system and balance out your neurochemicals in your prefrontal cortex. Action 5. Develop a personal cognitive fatigue checklist. Look for the 5 signs we discussed, which is default decisions, mental fog, avoidance, irritability, reward devaluation. When you notice these indicators, implement your reboot strategy before making important decisions. Remember, you're only one reconstructed thought away from the breakthrough you're seeking in your leadership journey. Clarity isn't something you're born with. It's a skill you can develop with intentional practice. As we wrap up today's episode on the Leadership Clarity Protocol, I want to leave you with this thought. Your leadership effectiveness doesn't come from powering through exhaustion or thinking harder when your brain needs a reset. It comes from working with your brain's natural functioning rather than against it. The Leadership Clarity Protocol isn't just an intervention when things go wrong. It's a leadership discipline that transforms how we show up every day. By integrating metabolizing stress into your daily practice, you're not just clearing your own thinking. You're modelling a new way of leading that ripples through the entire organisation. Next week, we'll be exploring how to lead through the 5 gatekeepers of human behaviour. You'll discover why people resist even the best ideas, how unconscious social threats derail your leadership influence, and practical techniques to create psychological safety that inspires genuine engagement. In the meantime, I've created a Leadership Clarity Protocol guide that you can access by going to my website, sue-ann.com.au/episode 7 and subscribing. It'll be sent straight to your inbox. If today's episode resonates with you, I'd love to hear which aspect of the Leadership Clarity Protocol you're implementing first. Connect with me on LinkedIn or my socials via @SueAnnAU and share your experience. Remember, leadership clarity doesn't come from powering through. It comes from knowing when to pause, reset, and return to your quiet leader within. Until next time, my lovely, this is Sue-Ann Higgins, and you're listening to the Leader Within podcast.